Alright, we're back with the hell-spawned homebrew trail bike, and things are starting to come into focus. I spent most of last weekend on the internet researching and my head spinning, and of course the costs are creeping up at every step. You know, at one point I thought to myself I might as well just be going out and buying retail a Trans 2 or something, but you know, the fact is you can't actually do that at the moment. You know, in fact you can't buy much of any bike unless you go for the really high-end models. Everything's out of stock. You know, this COVID-19 business has really stretched people's supply chains, so everything's coming soon, stock expected. So you can't, the fact is you can't buy a Trans 2, certainly. Anyway, that neglects the other factor, which is that building the bike is part of the experience. You know, this is a learning experience. I've learned so much already in the past week just researching this. But we've got a bit of a roadmap now, pretty clear where we're going with this, and indeed most of the components have already turned up. So let's talk about that. I have sourced a frame, and indeed that frame is one of the two that we looked at in the previous video, and it's the Pivot Mark 6 carbon frame. And I have to say there was a lot of head scratching before I committed to buying this. It's a hefty price, even though it's a knockdown price. We've got the ticket on here. It says 3,000 down to 1,400. I think the retail was 2,700 on this actually. But you know, it's a genuine brand new frame, unused, totally legitimately from the UK importer of Pivot cycles, of which I'd never been aware previously. But Pivot is a very prestigious brand and very high quality. This frame is amazingly light, feels almost insubstantial actually, which kind of worries me. Seems like it's made of balsa wood or polystyrene, well maybe not polystyrene. You know, I had my fair share of second thoughts after I'd ordered this up, but I did spend a lot of time dithering, 3 or 4 days, just thinking this through before I purchased it. I went to Pivot's site and looked at the specs, and I did a detailed comparison of all the important dimensions. This is a large size frame, which, you know, notionally I'm within the sort of build and size range for a large frame, but I wanted to make sure, so looked at things like the reach, the effective top tube length, the bottom bracket height, what else, chainstay length, all of that, and everything was and I measured it, you know, compared it with what I've got on my 3 existing bikes, and it was comfortably on the larger side, you know, so it's going to be a roomy bike, I convinced myself when it turned up. And then of course I realised that I'd been scrutinising the specs for the 2020 Mark 6 frame, which is the version 3. This is the Mark 6 version 2, and when later I found the equivalent specs for the Mark 2, they're all different because the geometry changed in 2018, I think. At that point I just stopped comparing. You know, I'd already bought the frame, and I'm just trusting that this is going to be a, you know, despite the differences, there's subtle differences at the end of the day, this is going to be a perfectly respectable size for me, I have little doubt. So here we go. What do we get on this frame? Well, it's carbon, which, well, I mean, I should say something about carbon as well. I'm still in two minds about, you know, I'm kind of frightened to touch this or knock it, or if you know, what if I scratch it? Will that compromise the integrity? You know, how many fibres do you have to cut before you know, weaken a key area of the frame? But then, you know, you watch these things being ridden around on YouTube, and they're designed to be chucked down the side of a mountain at 100 miles, well perhaps not 100 miles an hour, but, you know, to be abused really. So that's set my mind at ease somewhat. Other unintended or unexpected consequences: I'm not going to be able to carry this on my existing bike rack, because the bike rack that I have in the car supports the bike by squeezing or clamping to the down tube, which you don't want to do with a carbon frame. You know, some people will say you'll get away with that, and no doubt you could get away with it, but you're never quite sure. And I never was happy with that bike rack anyway, so we'll be going looking for another bike rack. But that said, what have we got here? We've got a carbon frame. We've got a Fox Float X factory, I don't know what order you put those words in, but it's a high quality rear shock with all sorts of little controls and adjustments on there which I've yet to research and don't know what they do specifically. Actually, I noticed the rebound adjust is a little magenta anodized wheel, which seems quite inaccessible in there. I'm not sure about that. We've got 155mm of travel on the rear. That's 6 inches, which is enormous. We're going to have to be very careful fitting the chain, taking that into account. We've got boost spacing at the back, so 148mm. This is at the axle. 27.5-inch wheels, 12-inch Maxell. Designed for now the Mark 6 version 3 is designed for 160mm fork. It can take up to 170. This one is designed, again, because remember the geometries have changed, this is designed to run 150 or 160. On the front we got a tapered head tube, so 1 1/8 to 1 1/2. Now I've set that up already. Well, I haven't set it up, but I've sourced the components. We've got nuke-proof headset, semi-integrated headset, so we've got a 44 external diameter for the top, 56 external diameter for the bottom. They need to be basically pressed in. Not going to do that myself, don't have the tools, but even if I had, I could buy the tools, but I'm very cautious about doing that. You put a foot wrong there and crack the frame and it's game over. So, or more likely you get them wedged in, and not aligned properly, and then it's not game over, but you're not going to get the ride that you need. We've got a 92mm BB86 bottom bracket, and likewise we've sourced nuke-proof bottom bracket. I think these are mid-range, high quality components. They're not cheap crap. We could go for top range things, but the Chris King Inset 2 headset is recommended for this, but that's like 170 quid just for the blinking headset. So we're not going mad, and I'm sure these nuke-proof bearings are all going to work out great. Oh, internal cable routing we've got, which is good, but it's going to be a pain. Especially, it occurred to me thinking back to the brakes. I'm going to put the SLX brakes, transfer them from this Boardman bike, which I've just fitted them to, over to here. To route that rear cable, I'm going to have to, pull the hose from the lever end and then thread it through. I mean, hopefully that's going to be possible without making a mess. The next thing is, that hose may, because I cut it down a little bit, it may not be long enough, we don't know yet, in which case I'm going to have to buy a new hose. I'll only need one, because the front brake, assuming its cable's long enough, that doesn't need routing through the frame. And I can't see why that would be, okay, it's going to be a bigger fork, but only by like 2 centimetres. So that brake will probably just swap over, no problem. We've got fittings here for chain guard, bash guard, which I haven't sourced. I might do that. We're absent certain things. This is a race bike or an enduro bike frame, really, not a touring bike. I mean, I want more of a touring. It's going to be more of a touring bike in terms of what I'm going to use it for. But we're absent. There's nowhere to hang a bottle cage on this. I think the version 3 frame has got lugs here, and you can get probably a 500ml bottle on there, and it's got lugs on the bottom, so you can get another bottle. This one doesn't seem to have lugs at all. There are some fittings on the bottom. Maybe you can put a bottle cage on the bottom, so I'll have to find another solution. I like to carry 2 bottles when I can. 180mm rotor on the back minimum. You can't put a smaller rotor on there. Which is fine. I mean, I won't say anything about the technicalities of the suspension. I don't really know anything about the technicalities of the suspension, other than it's damned heavy duty, should we say. Currently just got a conventional seat post on here. It's an alloy seat post, race face. I bought that many so I could put the bike on the stand. We do want a dropper post eventually, but you know, my budget's already stretched and I might do without the dropper for a while. You can use an internally routed dropper post, which again it's going to be tidy, it's going to be good, but has its drawbacks as well. And we don't have one. I've thought, you know, in my head I was going to transfer the dropper post from here, but of course this has got a 30.9mm post diameter. This one's a 31.8, so we're not going to be transferring that. It's too big. So that's the chassis part 1. Chassis part 2 is the fork. Now if you buy one of these from the manufacturer built up, all the specs, I mean, they do different levels of build specs, but even the entry level's got a Fox float. I can't remember exactly what manner of fork you get, but it's a very expensive Fox one, and that's kind of what this frame deserves. But you know, my budget doesn't run to that. Also, you know, I'm not going to make use of that fork. Let's be honest. A fork that level, at least for now. So I'm going to build it up with something a little bit more cost effective, shall we say. I did look at, I mean, I just can't afford a Fox shock, even the cheaper ones at the moment. So I was looking at RockShox, you know, the entry level shocks, and then I thought, well, look, let's go on eBay. So we've sourced this guy from eBay. This is a RockShox Yari. I don't know how you say that. Now then, this is second hand in principle, but in practice it's pretty much brand new. This the colour scheme's not going to match, obviously. This is black with red detailing on, but we're not going to worry too much about that. This is a 150mm fork. This is a kind of a well, I mean, it's relatively low end, I suppose, by the manner of the pro RockShox forks, but it's fairly respectable trail style fork. 150mm travel, tapered steerer. Checked that it hadn't been cut down too far. It's fine. The head tube's 12.5cm, and this is comfortably bigger than that. We've got, you know, infinitely adjustable compression damping. We've got air sprung fork, and it's tunable, so you can swap in and out the volume spaces. I think there's 1 or 2 volume spaces in there by default. You can take them out. We've got 2 spare ones. We can put them in, and that changes the bottom end, I suppose, the spring rate effectively. It's an air spring, obviously. I mean, this fork's amazingly light. It's under 2 kilos, or it's about 2 kilos. So that's pretty good. The story is this came on a white enduro bike, and the owner convinced himself there was something wrong with it, so it went back for a warranty repair. It went back twice, and SRAM are convinced that it operates perfectly well. They replaced something in it, but to all intents and purposes, an unused fork. You know, it's been around the block a couple of times. Now, one thing to be aware of in terms of geometry, this is an OEM spec fork, spec for that white, I don't know which of the white bikes it was. So the fork offset is 42mm, which is slightly idiosyncratic. This is spec to take 46mm. That's the offset of the axle from the centre of the fork leg, if you like. And so this is smaller, which means the trail of the wheel is longer, which in principle means it's going to be more stable. It's going to steer more slowly, whichever way you like to formulate that. In practice, I think that's going to be inconsequential. I'm not going to notice that. You know, I run my Trek Marlin with that came with a G2 fork, which was, I think, a 51mm offset, 29-inch wheels, and I replaced it with a RockShox fork with a 46mm offset, and didn't bother me. I didn't notice the difference, other than it was a much better fork than the original crappy one. Boost spacing again, so we've got 115, I think it is, on the front. Is that right? Oh no, 110. Oh, I can't remember. But it's boost spacing and a 15mm Maxell on there. So good to go. We've already got Crown Race on here, which looks in good nick. But once we get the headset on, we can plonk that in. We can start thinking about getting this thing rolling.